What's poppin', everybody? Episode 34 of the Slip and Wait podcast. A lot to get into this week. Let me tell you, we got all these fights from last weekend. Mauricio Lara upsetting Josh Warrington. We got the return of Jojo Diaz. We got the return of Richard Commey. And I'm going to be doing a prediction on the fight next weekend between Miguel Berchelt and Oscar Valdez. And I want to just touch briefly on the return of Adrien Broner next weekend. So let's get right into it. Right? I mean, there was not that many fights going on for the first 6 weeks of the year, and this past weekend just 3 different cards, all back to back, 2 on DAZN, 1 on ESPN. To start with, man, I just wanted to get into the fucking huge upset of Josh Warrington. Mauricio Lara, who I had never heard of, knocks Josh Warrington out in round 9, drops him in round 4, and honestly, when he dropped him in the 4th, Warrington just never really recovered from that in a meaningful way. His legs were always shaky, and even though he had moments, right, where he was, let's up that one more. Ooh, it looks even better. He had moments where, he was able to start boxing well, and he was actually hitting Lara with some real shit. But I think the main difference in this was punch resistance. It was just very obvious that every time Lara would land a punch, that Warrington was shook by it. That it was physically stopping his offense. And it's really weird. I don't know. With fights like this, it's so hard because Lara is a complete unknown. I don't really know anything about anyone he's fought particularly. You know what I mean? So it's just it's hard to know, is this the layoff? Is this having a difficult time finding a place to train properly and getting good sparring? Is it circumstances of this moment? You know what I'm saying? Is it not taking the opponent seriously? Is it looking past the opponent? There's a lot of different things when you break down a fight like this that it could be. Because at the end of the day, I mean, this was supposed to be, very simply put, a tune-up. And it's actually completely derailed the number 1 featherweight in the world's career. This is probably the biggest upset. I mean, I can't think of a bigger upset since Joshua Ruiz. Maybe there's been one. If you can think of one, comment below. But this is a massive upset. It's funny because Lara's style is real crude. So I thought, all right, he buzzed him, and Warrington was kind of lucky to get through the round without the ref stopping it. But I thought the pedigree is going to show. The pedigree is going to show. He's going to be able to catch his rhythm, and ultimately this kid's just going to be out of his depth, and he's going to be looking for the power shot. And that's what I felt like was happening for 3 rounds or so, and then it just kept happening that Lara would catch him so clean with this wide, awkward shit. And Warrington really just couldn't recover, man. I was really surprised, honestly. I've seen this guy. I watched this fight with Carl Froch. I watched this fight with Lee Selby. I was very surprised that somebody this crude was able to get to him. But I think, all the things I talked about, the layoff and the training issues and whatever, I think it's a combination of everything. And I think Mauricio Lara is a better fighter than was being given credit. I think his power is legit. I think if he gets you good, he got you good. You know what I mean? So all those things come into consideration. I mean, hopefully Warrington, the thing that worried me about this fight was when it didn't get stopped in the 4th, there was just several stretches of time in the fight where he was just taking a lot of punishment, man. Warrington was taking a lot of punches. And the knockout was ultimately kind of brutal. I like him as a fighter, and I just hope that a fight like this doesn't take something out of him long term. You know what I mean? That he's not, that it doesn't just take a little piece of him with it. Because this is, to be honest with you, this is the kind of fight where that can happen. Where somebody is never entirely the same. He's probably going to, this is his first fight in a while, but he's probably going to need some time off. because that's a tough beating to take. That's a very difficult beating to take, and he's gonna have to completely reinvent himself. It was hard to watch. He showed a lot of bravery, but that's boxing, man. It's like it's predictable and it's not. There's times where it's like this is clearly a levels fight, and then there's times where what is not supposed to happen happens, and that's why you got to be prepared for every single fight, because it's ultimately somebody that's coming to fucking knock you out. You know what I mean? Which I think is actually a pretty good segue into the Jojo Diaz and Shavkat Rakhimov draw, also on DAZN later in the day. But the fight just before that was Brian Castaño winning a unanimous decision over Patrick Teixeira from Brazil. And I really like Castaño, man. I really like the way he fights. I saw his fight against Adrien Lara, and that fight was scored a draw. Thought it was a close fight. Wasn't mad with that decision. And if I'm not mistaken, that's the only time I've seen him. And what was really impressive about this fight to me was that Teixeira was actually doing a pretty good job of keeping long and keeping mobile, and kind of throwing long straight punches. I mean, some of it was wide, but he was throwing it from a range that Castaño couldn't answer. But the thing about Castaño is he would work his way inside with his feet, with quick little burst of movements, and have these little flurry combinations, and he would just sort of and then he would pop back out, and he'd be moving his head, he'd be catching shit on his gloves, and then the minute there was an opening, he would pop in again, let 3-4 go, pop back out. And it was just like it's an unpredictable come forward style, where he's also very hard to hit. Like he did a great job of blocking and parrying shots, moving his head, moving his upper body. And even, Teixeira was landing really hard body shots the whole fight, and it just never slowed him down at all. He just kept having those flurries, and anytime he could pin Teixeira on the ropes, he would let go of a hard flurry. And what's cool about him is he knows how to take advantage of those spots, and he doesn't really waste any of them. Like, he knows in that fight specifically, I'm shorter, I got shorter arms, this guy's jabbing and moving a little bit. If I get an opportunity to get a couple off, I got to jump on that opportunity. And I think he did that. And to be honest with you, I think he's a tough fight for anybody at 154, in my opinion. They were talking about him fighting Jermell Charlo. I like that fight. If he's got a belt and that's a unification fight that can be made easily, why not? It's unification fights are hard enough as it is. So if there's two guys that are interested in it, it's just like, come on, we got to do this now. So I think great win for Castaño. Teixeira's a very tough, long, hard puncher. And to be honest with you, even when they would fight inside and Teixeira was landing some shots, for the most part, Castaño made it look kind of easy. It was weird because it was one of the most brutal one-sided fights I've seen in a while. Like, each round was relatively competitive, but ultimately Castaño was just kind of a different level. So hopefully we get to see Castaño and Jermell Charlo next. We'll see. The main event was Jojo Diaz and Shavkat Rakhimov. Jojo Diaz relinquished his belt because he missed weight by about 3.5 pounds. And so ultimately, it was only on the line for Rakhimov because he was so overweight. I think he was like 133.5 for a 130-pound fight. And he was so overweight that the commission wouldn't even let him, try to cut that weight to make weight. So he was immediately stripped of his belt. I don't know the whole story. I'm not going to pretend like I know the whole story, but it's very obvious to me that he had allowed his weight to get up to where getting to 130 was no longer realistic in the time frame. Because 3.5 pounds in boxing, that's like a lot of weight. You know what I mean? It wasn't like he was a pound off, half a pound off. If you're 3.5 pounds, he was a lightweight. So it's like, there's something going. We don't know the whole story about why that happened, how that happened, but I think just looking at how I've seen him fight before and how sharp he normally is and the condition that he's usually in, like I thought overall this was kind of a disappointing performance for Jojo Diaz. And to be honest with you, I thought he won the fight. I mean, I'm not mad about the draw, but I kind of felt like he won. I felt like he won 7 or 8 rounds, particularly down the stretch. He definitely won the last 4 or 5 rounds. So, but regardless of the decision, I don't think like he looked like he was in great shape, which I'm not usually one to use the eye test about someone's conditioning. It's like if you're performing well and you don't look the best, I'm going to take your performance as the criteria, you know what I mean? But in this one, I just didn't feel like I saw the same sharpness that I'm used to seeing with Jojo Diaz. Because I really like watching this guy fight, and he usually is a very crisp, accurate puncher. And I think Rakhimov showed him just enough variation. And I think he was like, I'm not going to say he was huffing and puffing, but I mean, I don't think he was twinkle toes either. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think he was having a hard time getting through the rounds. I saw him clock check a couple of times. So to me, it was just like similar to the Warrington situation. It's like, what is the cause of that? Obviously, Rakhimov is a tough opponent. So that's a part of it, right? The opponent is a good opponent. So if he's not at his absolute best, it's a rough night. I think Rakhimov is a real opponent. Obviously, though, conditioning was a factor. It has to be. You can't be that far off the weight, and it's not a factor. So, I mean, it was a great fight also, and I think he showed a lot of championship level grit to dominate the last 4 or 5 rounds of the fight, in spite of the fact that a lot of those rounds were a little slow. A lot of times he wasn't getting his punches off. A lot of times Rakhimov was getting off combinations and getting out before there was an answer. So there was enough. Through those first 8 rounds, it was either even or Rakhimov slightly ahead. You know what I mean? And Diaz did show that grit to take over the last stretch of the fight and just kind of outwill Rakhimov and out-physical him. But there was just whole stretches of the fight. I mean, after like the 3rd to the 8th round, I really did not think Diaz looked good. I thought he looked kind of tired. I thought he looked like he was dragging his feet. I thought he looked like he couldn't react the way he wanted to, that he was thinking, and that his mind was moving faster than his body. So, I don't know. It's very similar to the Josh Warrington situation. Obviously, he didn't lose, and so that salvages, you know what I'm saying, his career. But I think the pandemic is affecting fighters. Particularly at the top level, when you're like used to a certain kind of training and access to certain stuff and access to certain equipment, it does seem like having these long layoffs is affecting top level fighters. I think even more than I would have expected. I think everyone thinks that, oh, this is great, I got some time off, I can stay in shape, I'm going to heal up, whatever. And that's true for some guys. But for some guys, it's not. For some guys, it's not good to have this much time out of the ring. If you lose your discipline, you can't get the kind of sparring you need to get to stay as sharp as you need to be. It's just a really difficult time to train. And so I think we're just seeing some of that when some of these guys are returning from 12, 14, 16-month layoffs. But at the end of the day, that isn't entirely an excuse, because I think for who Rakhimov is, he was very sharp. You know what I'm saying? But ultimately, Diaz's class did play down the stretch. He was able to out-hustle him. I'm not mad about the draw, and I wouldn't have a problem with them running it back either. That's another fight where it's like, it seems like at least the narrative of the fight is going to be that Rakhimov is better than expected and Diaz wasn't that sharp. So I don't see why you shouldn't do a rematch. Probably be easy to make. It was a tough physical fight. Do it in 5-6 months. You know, but maybe Diaz wants something bigger, but at the end of the day, you got to smoke this guy to get that something bigger. So that's what it is for Jojo Diaz. I really like him, but he's got I think he's got some questions to answer after that one. Even though, I mean, I love his skill set, man. He's a great, like, combination boxer, puncher, good on the defense, but he comes forward real nice. You know what I mean? He's got a nice variety. But it's just these times in this fight where it's one punch at a time and kind of slow. And I think that regardless of who he fights next, he needs to make sure that he's in good shape. And if he can't make 130, he's got to move up. You know what I mean? And I think he probably has the body type where he could do that. So we'll see what's next for both of these guys. The last fight card that I wanted to talk about from last Saturday, the 13th, was the fact that Maxim Vlasov, Joe Smith Jr., got canceled because of Vlasov testing positive for COVID-19, so hope he's doing all right. Kind of bummed that fight got canceled. I thought it was going to be a good one. And the main event wound up being Richard Commey stopping Jackson Marinez in the 6th round. Before I talk about that, I wanted to just briefly touch on Jared Anderson's performance. I forgot his name for a sec. Jared Anderson's performance. Really good young heavyweight. I think they said he's 21. You know, I think he's 6'5", 250. In great shape. Moves well. And by the way, stops Kingsley eBay in the 6th round in a 6-round fight. Moves really well. He doesn't really fight like a heavyweight, man. I think that this kid's going to be the next. I think this kid's next. You know what I'm saying? Unless some shit goes really wrong, I think this kid is next. And I say that because he doesn't entirely fight like a heavyweight. He's very light on his feet. He's very bouncy. The way he puts his punches together. You know, a lot of heavyweights are very plodding, very one punch at a time. The approach in heavyweight boxing can be a little different because of the one punch changes everything. Consequence. I've got the fucking hiccups and shit today. But I really like how he's able to come forward behind his jab, keep his jab nice and busy. He's really patient. He mixes up where he puts his shots. It's just very rare that you see heavyweights that big, that with that level of athleticism and coordination. He fights like a super middleweight, light heavyweight. You know what I mean? So even though I like eBay, I've talked about him on this show before, but I think that a little tough to know where Anderson is at based on this fight, just because I think he was in a completely different class than eBay. I would like to actually see him maybe against eBay's most recent opponent, Guido Vianello. I think that would be a really good fight. Two young heavyweights that really know how to box, both undefeated, and both promoted top rank ESPN. So I think that should probably get made. I know they're probably trying to move him along slowly, but I think that would be a good test for both of them because I think Guido's a good fighter too. And then the main event, we had Richard Commey stopping Jackson Marinez. I like Comey's game, man. He's fun to watch. He's definitely has technical flaws, and he's easy to hit sometimes. But I think that overall, the fact that he's so powerful and he's so relentless, if you don't really clip him and hurt him, it's going to be hard to keep him off of you. And Teofimo Lopez is the only guy that's ever really been able to stop him, I think. So it'd be tough to call him chinny. I think he's a durable guy. Marinez, I saw in his last fight against Rolly Romero, thought he won the fight very clearly. And I was actually a little surprised in this fight. I thought Marinez might win just because he has really good feet. He's got pretty good technical boxing skills, which kind of threw Romero off. But this is where you see class levels. You know what I'm saying? Like, Commey knew, because he's been in there with top guys, he knew when to apply that pressure, when to get physical. You know, there's just certain intangibles. He sees you breathe in, you know, whatever. But he has that knowledge of how to capitalize on those moments. So when he started getting physical with Marinez, that was clearly he was out of his depth. He was out of his element. He had never been that physical on the inside. You could see there was holding, and he was just taking shots, I think, that he wasn't necessarily expecting to take. and he wasn't able to keep the fight at arm's length the way he was against Romero. And ultimately, and I think that's why Commey stopped him, was because he just was able to break that jab barrier, that jab movement barrier, get in his chest, land power punches. And it was one of those fights. It's like guys that are good boxers, but if the fight gets super, super physical and they don't, they can't keep you off of them, it can get a little dicey. And it's like kind of a Carlos Quintana type situation, like very good technical boxer, maybe not the most durable, but I think that I think Marinez can learn something from this night, from this particular fight, and learn a little bit more about the physicality when you start fighting the very top level guys. And I think that even if you put Commey, in the bottom part of your top 10 at lightweight, he's in that top 10. So once you get up into that space, you're dealing with a different level of risk. And I think that Marinez learned that the hard way. And to be honest with you, I think Rolly Romero would learn that the hard way as well, if he at this point in his career stepped up and fought one of these top guys. And that's ultimately the difference between prospects and contenders, is the well-roundedness of your game and being able to read certain shit. It was really cool too to see Teofimo Lopez ringside, supporting Richard Commey, cheering him on. He was like hanging out in the locker room and shit with him. It was just cool to see unity between fighters and shit, even Jared Anderson, after he knocked out eBay, was like kneeling down next to him. You could see that, that he was concerned about it. So it's one of my favorite things about boxing, is like the unity between fighters. You know what I'm saying? Like once it's over, even if you're sparring, it's like once the round is over, it's all respect. Because I know what I just went through. So if I just went through it, you just went through it. And that means that I respect you more than anyone else in this room, almost. You know what I mean? It's a weird... It's a respect that can only be shared by having that experience, by like getting in the ring and really exchanging with people and exchanging punches and facing that danger and all that. Like once you've been through that, it's an odd bond. You know what I mean? And it was cool to see that in action at the highest level, amongst two world champions. And that's ultimately what it's all about, man. And I've always wished that like boxing got more respect than it gets, because these guys are risking their lives. And I've constantly tried to remind everyone of that on this show if I can. Like these guys are genuinely, and girls are genuinely risking their lives every time they get in the ring. So to talk about boxing like it's a, like a baseball game or a basketball game, it's just not the same thing. There's different stakes in this sport. And yeah, so I know that was kind of a tangent, but I just think that when fighters show respect like that, you're really able to see what these guys are going through to get to that point, because only two fighters could know what a fighter goes through. You know what I'm saying? So that's everything from this past weekend. Next weekend, to start with, we got the return of Adrien Broner on Showtime. He's going to be taking on a guy named Giovanni Santiago. And I'm interested to see what Broner does in this fight, because I have very mixed feelings about him, like a lot of people. Like, he's a very skilled guy. When he was super young, he had like somewhat phenom quality to him. Great hand speed, like pretty decent punching power. Got the reflexes, like he's got all the stuff. But then the intangible shit, like the stuff I was talking about with Commey, he lacks a lot of that. Like he doesn't read situations that well. I don't think he doesn't, especially at the top level. He doesn't make adjustments real well. And I'm interested to see, it's like at this point, he's 33, 4-1. So he's had you could basically say he's had 5-second chances at this point. And so I think he's one of those guys like a Victor Ortiz type, where he's at a point in his career, early 30s, could still make something happen, but has been through some shit in his career and has not fought in 2 years. So I think when I'm looking at him making a comeback, it's like, what are you going to do with this? Are you making a check? Because I know I don't know that much, but I know he's had some personal issues and some financial issues and whatever. I'm not going to speak on that too much, but it's like, are you fighting for the check? Or are you fighting, to show everybody your talent in a real way? To bring everything you got to the table. Because there's so many times it's like not so many, but there's many times where I've watched him where it does feel a little like a waste. It's like, how could you have all of those skills and just not really be doing as much as you should with them? And I think that it's not even every time he's lost, I think the Pacquiao fight, the fact that he would get through that fight and say, I won that fight, it's just like, you're not learning lessons as you go along. And he's fighting a lot of, top guys. He's fought Sean Porter, fought Maidana, fought Jesse Vargas. He's fought some killers, you know what I'm saying? And you would think that might be adding up and adding to his game, and he's learning. But I don't ever see that. It's like every time he gets in the ring, it's like there's this chance that he's going to fulfill, that potential that I think people thought he might 5-10 years ago. And it just has not come to be. And I'm not hating on him. I'm rooting for him. That's what I'm saying. It's like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see him undercut his talent, because there's a lot of guys that don't have a lot of talent that make it. And there's a lot of guys that have talent that never get the fucking opportunities he got. So I'll be interested to see Adrien Broner come back next weekend. And hopefully, I don't really know much about the opponent, Giovanni Santiago, but I'm hoping that Broner's taking him really seriously and is taking himself really seriously. And I don't have any problem with him being an entertainer. You do what you got to do, get your money up. I don't really care about that, I think. But if it's like with Floyd. It's like the difference between Broner and Floyd is Floyd is flashy and 100% of the time backs it up in the ring. Whereas Adrien hasn't. Adrien has had 5-second chances. So the flashiness is going to be interpreted differently. It just is. Because you're not invincibility is not the word, because obviously Floyd's not invincible, but you're the at least the air of like you're unbeatable. It's not there. You're definitely very beatable at a certain level. And I just think that he's got a lot to prove in this fight. If he wants to be a serious contender, he does and has always had the talent to do it. It's just a matter of, does he want to do it? He has the most access in the fucking world to the best equipment, the best training, everything. The kid has what you need. So if he can't get it done, it's a fucking waste. That's all I'm saying. And I hope he has a good performance. And the last thing I want to talk about is this fight next weekend on ESPN between Miguel Berchelt and Oscar Valdez. I'm very fucking excited about this fight, you guys. I am very fucking excited about this fight because it's two junior lightweight world champions, legitimately world champions too. Not some fucking rinky-dink trinket-ass belt. These guys got real belts, won against real contenders or real champions. And they're both Mexican warriors, man. How could you go wrong? I mean, Berchelt is somebody whose punch output is just ridiculous. The kid throws so many fucking shots in one round, when he really gets going. And then it's actually interesting. If he wants to get up on his feet and box a little bit, he can do that too. So I think what's interesting with this fight too is that they both can do a lot of different things. They're both very versatile fighters. Valdez has great hand speed. He is really good on the inside if you watch the Scott Quigg fight. He's tremendous on the inside. I think in recent years he's trying to adopt more of a boxer puncher style, but it's almost like he's in between styles. The last couple of times I've seen him fight, like the Jason Valdez fight, which I talked about, like it wasn't like he had a bad performance, but it wasn't good. Like it was Valdez was a little more successful maybe than he should have been, was able to land some shots. It's good to be defensive, but you have to be sharp enough to do the make you miss, make you pay thing. If you're just kind of not letting your hands go and mostly making the other guy miss, it just looks like you're inactive. So it has to be setting something up. I think if he's going to be in between styles in this fight, he's going to be in a lot of trouble because Berchelt is not going to give him room to breathe. I don't think Berchelt is going to give this kid any fucking room for 12 rounds or however long it lasts. So I think Valdez is going to have to, I think he's going to get forced into an inside fight at a certain point. And it's just going to come down to, have you been able to expand your defensive arsenal enough to like fend off that onslaught as it's coming at you from up close? You know, I just don't see a world where like he's not enough of a technical outside boxer to keep Berchelt on the outside and to keep moving. I just don't see that happening. It could happen, but I don't see it happening. I think that Berchelt sooner or later is going to get in Valdez's chest, and it's going to become pretty much like a good old fashioned Mexican fight. And I do think that Berchelt is going to win. I like Valdez a lot, and I think there's certain things he does better than Berchelt. I think he's got better technique. I think he's got better hand speed. I think there's like his feet are a little better, so technically I think he's a little better. But I think that the relentlessness of Berchelt, the output, the size, the punching power, all of those things mixed together, the punch out, the knockout percentage, is like all of these things are going to be a lot for Valdez to overcome. And just the fights that I've seen, how physical they've been, you know, and how he does a lot of times get hurt or clipped or caught, whatever you want to call it. I don't think against this guy that he's going to be able to keep him off him. And I don't think he's got the power to slow him down either. So I think you can expect Berchelt by decision or late stoppage. You know, I never like to say these things too confidently, but I do think that Berchelt is too much, and I think that ultimately Berchelt is going to be too much for just about anybody at 130. The fight that I would really like to see for him, that's like the utmost entertainment, I think would be Miguel Berchelt against Leo Santa Cruz. Maybe we'll get to see that at some point, but that's my pick, guys. I'm going to go with Berchelt by decision or late stoppage, and could be wrong, but to be honest with you, I just don't. I really like Valdez's game, but I just don't think he's a technical enough boxer, and I don't think he's durable enough on the inside to hang with Berchelt. So, yeah, that's it, guys. That's episode 34 of the Slip Movie Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in again. I appreciate you guys as always, and I'll be back next week with my post-fight thoughts on Berchelt Valdez and the return of Adrien Broner, and probably other shit. I don't really know yet, so one week at a time. We'll get there. All right, guys. Peace.